Mel Stride, if it's true that the government plans to send failed asylum seekers to a third country in the Balkans, would you support that in principle?
Well, we need to look at it closely. Whilst it is for failed asylum seekers, it is nonetheless very similar to the kind of arrangements that we were bringing in around Rwanda, which, of course, the current government scoffed at and said would never work. My view was that they pulled that far too early. We had flights ready to go off in July, so we never saw the actual effect of that happening, other than the fact that we saw a number of asylum seekers actually leaving Northern Ireland to escape our jurisdiction at that time and various changes. So deterrence works. Deterrence works. But it's interesting, they've come back to the kind of territory that we were in, which they said was the wrong thing to do.
So if they bring us to the House of Commons and say, this is what we're going to do, we've accepted the principle of deterrence, you guys are going to line up behind them?
Well, we'll have to look at any particular approach in detail before coming to a firm conclusion. And, of course, we don't know the form in which any of those votes, if there are any, are put before the House. So we'll have to consider that at the time. But my point is, Trevor, this is important. Look, they talked down what we did with Rwanda. They do now seem to be moving in that kind of direction. And there's a certain irony there. And also the fact that, of course, by cancelling Rwanda, they wasted a huge amount of money.
OK. Well, it's so interesting. When you're in government, everybody... things that you wanted in government, in opposition, don't look quite so attractive, it seems. But anyway, let's talk about the spring statement. Your boss, Kemi Badenoch, promised last autumn to, I'm quoting here, make Rachel wriggle. You've already come out this morning criticising her before she's said anything much. Just as a matter of good manners, don't you think, given that much of what she's got to deal with is your doing or your party's doing, a period of silence might be in order from the Tories?
Well, we've had various things to say about the past, but we're now looking ahead with this government coming to the House of Commons on Wednesday with what will be an emergency budget, effectively. It won't just be reading out the figures from the OBR. There'll be major announcements that will have to be made. And they will have to be made because the government has not gripped the economy. So the first thing that Rachel Reeves and the government did on coming into office was to talk down the economy. They came up with this fictitious black hole of 22 billion that the OBR themselves says they won't legitimise.
Well, you say it's fictitious.
Well, the OBR said, and I'm using their language, they will not legitimise that figure. So they have looked at it in detail. But look, also what they've done is they've slapped huge amounts of taxes on businesses. They've borrowed vast amounts of money across the forecast period. That has pushed inflation up higher than it would otherwise be. That has meant interest rates being higher for longer, so interest rates will be coming down more quickly had they not taken this decision. And that has impacts for the public finances because of our debt servicing costs, and also for mortgage holders and others.
I'm hearing the critique. What I'm not hearing is any acceptance of responsibility for the situation that they and we are in on behalf of your party, which was in government for 14 years.
So, look, I think across that 14 years, there were many things that the Conservative Party did that were absolutely right, not just around the economy, for example.
Absolutely wrong there. I was hoping that you might admit that there was something that you didn't do right.
Jobs. Look, there were things. Net migration was certainly one of them that we've already touched on, and Kemi has had a number of things to say about that. But look, we got us through COVID, and we got us through the inflationary pressures that came to our shores because of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and we supported the economy through that. On the day of the general election, we had just had the fastest growth.
More of a hearing if, for once, you guys were to say, you know what, we made some mistakes. The trust budget, some of our migration, yes, but some of our decisions on spending and so on, much higher. The disability benefits bill ballooned during your time. Wouldn't it give you more of a hearing if you for once admitted actually, you made some mistakes?
So, Trevor, on the so-called mini-budget, I was then chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and I had a lot to say about it before it happened, when it happened, and since it happened. And that is a situation that this party will never, ever repeat. So I will make sure that by the time we get to the next general election, the electorate are very confident that we believe in sound money, in prudence when it comes to the public finances, and that we will make sure the economy is kept in a sustainable and good place. And it's as simple as that. Now, just very quickly, though, the inheritance that this government had was the fastest growing economy in the G7, almost record levels of employment, near record low levels of unemployment. We'd had real wages rising for 13 consecutive months. And we brought that inflation that came to our shores because of the Russia-Ukraine war down from over 11% to bang on target at 2% on the day of the general election. It hasn't taken this government more than about 6 or 7 months to unwind all of that and put us in a position where actually growth is now stone dead.
Let me ask you about some of the decisions that the Chancellor might have to make. One of the things that, talking to the Chancellor this morning, that struck me is that she referred to the OBR several times and waiting for the OBR's forecast, working on the OBR's numbers and so on. If you were to return to government, would you reverse enshrining into law the OBR's powers? Because there are some people who are asking, who's really running the government now? Is it the Treasury or is it the OBR?
So I think it's important that we have a body that basically marks the government's homework and that it's not left to chancellors to decide what the forecasts are going to be, because there's always a temptation then to be overly optimistic. That's not the same thing as saying that we shouldn't look at the way the OBR works. It's not the same thing as saying we shouldn't look at the way a number of these arm's length bodies work, the FCA, the PRA and others, and what their remit is.
These are financial regulators.
Those are financial regulators, exactly. So I think we need to start with a blank sheet of paper, but I think the principle of making sure there is an independent, robust assessment of the Chancellor's figures and fiscal interventions and so on is an important and sound principle.
All right. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to talk to you since we heard Liz Kendall's statement on disability benefits and so forth. Your colleague Helen Whately, in responding to those proposals, said that they didn't go far enough. Who else would you be punishing to balance the books?
There's no question about punishing anybody, but there is a question here.
That's what withdrawal benefits does.
Well, no, I think what you said was that Helen said they don't go far enough, and they don't, and let me explain why. So if you are going to carry out welfare reform, you have a solemn duty to do it in a careful, thoughtful way, a principled way. And two of the key principles are, firstly, that you're fair to the taxpayer, and that means that we cannot afford to have these ever-spiralling welfare costs. And secondly, you have to do it in a way so that you look out for and look after the most vulnerable in our society. And what that tells you is the last thing you do is rush it. Now, what this government did was they fought shy of welfare reform. In fact, in the manifesto, they don't even mention personal independence payments, which is the main area that they've changed. They came into government, they fought shy of it. Why? Because it's a very divisive issue across the Labour Party. And then when Rachel Reeves suddenly discovered there was no money left and she was going underwater, the word went out that they would suddenly have to find savings,
and it was rushed. On what they're doing.
So my point, yes, and I'm coming to that. I'm coming to exactly that. Exactly that.
Okay.
So when you come to principled reform, rather than what I've just described that this Labour government has done in terms of scrabbling around, you can find greater savings and be fairer to people.
Where?
So on PIP, for example, we had already consulted when we were in government on reforms to personal independence payments, which included an array of different options, some of which we would have taken forward, which would have saved more money for this government. For example,
I'm just trying to get you to tell me.
Let's get detailed. It's a very detailed area.
Who's not going to get the money?
I'm very happy to say that. What this government has done is they've changed the assessment arrangements to get PIP. That's how they've made the savings. What we would have been looking at is a fundamental overhaul of PIP to make sure that rather than being a blunt instrument about providing cash, almost irrespective of your condition or whether it continues on through time and so on.
In all of that,
we make it more targeted and we save more money. But you can't do it by rushing it.
When you say make it more... I'm just trying to get to understand what this means in the real world.
Yes.
Rather than policy speak. When you say make it more targeted, does that mean that you think that there should be fewer people getting PIP?
What it means is that if you were on PIP, for example, and you had a mental health condition, a reformed PIP would quite possibly say, Trevor, rather than giving you amounts of money every year, we will actually provide you with treatment that will help you, and in particular, help you, for example, if you're not in work, to get into work. So a totally different approach, which would be better for you and better for the taxpayer.
I'm not hearing where the savings come out of that.
Well, if you get somebody who has a mental health challenge and you take them from being dependent upon cash payment through PIP into coming off those payments through treatment and into work, that is clearly an area of saving.
That's
but
interesting.
that's a fundamentally different way of doing it, and that's not what this government's done. They've just simply said, we'll make it more difficult to get PIP, and
that's interesting, because actually...
that's putting a lever that you do if you're
That's
rushed.
very interesting, because mental illness is the largest single benefit set of claims for people of working age. 47% of claims in that cohort are for mental health. So you're saying, actually, we'd basically take an axe to that.
No, I'm saying that there's a different way of helping people in that situation that's better for the taxpayer and equally better for them. And that's what principled welfare reform that's thoughtful and properly thought through should be about. Not scrabbling around at the last minute, pulling levers to save money because you're going to have to stand up at the House of Commons on Wednesday and explain why there's no money left.
Mel Stride, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.